This week, Mr. Ford, you brought forward your long-awaited transportation strategy in the middle of the night, and it squashed much of the hopes that we had for progress on transport. But in the case of the one line that you did propose, that is the expansion of the Shepherd subway line, you said that there was $3.7 billion of provincial funding available in the next 5 years, which could be reallocated to that project. Given, A, that $790 million of that $3.7 billion is actually allocated to York Region, and given, B, that the city and the province would bear extraordinary charges for the cancellation of contracts on other projects which have already been let, can you give us some insight into whether you've actually had a chance to rejig your numbers and make them work? Because you're off by at least $790 million plus additional charges.
What you said wasn't accurate. So what we have from Mr. McGinty has promised to give us $3.7 billion in Transit City money. And I'm not a believer in Transit City, as you know. I think the money should be spent on subways. We could take the set $3.7 billion. We sell the air rights for minimum $1 billion. We could get as much as $2 billion. So there's $4.7 billion. And it's paid for. If Mr. McGinty reneges on the deal that he promised to give us, then he has to face the voters a year later.
Focusing very specifically just on the $3.7 billion figure, are you not yet aware, several days later, that that $3.7 billion figure for transit initiatives, including Transit City, also included $790 million for York Region's expansion of their Viva line?
No.
In other words, you see the 3.7, but actually that was 3.7, 790 million of which was dedicated to transit in York Region.
Actually, it's $3.7 billion to the City of Toronto for Transit City. And if he wants to renege on that, that's his prerogative. He has to face the voters.
Well, point A is on that. Actually, you're wrong. So maybe I could just go to the second part of my financial question is that given that Lovett Equipment in Etobicoke, not far from your home base, given that has already been contracted to buy a tunnel boring machine for the Eglinton LRT, the underground LRT that is to go across the Eglinton corridor, given that contracts have been let for the LRT that is to go on Shepherd East, and given that there's expectation of tens of millions of dollars of contract breaking charges associated with that, why have you not factored in any of the costs associated with breaking these contracts?
You're presuming. You have no idea how much it's going to cost to break a contract. So obviously, you enter into contracts in business all the time, and we have to analyze it and see how much it's going to cost.
How much have you set aside now? Because we do have a model actually from Ottawa.
Nobody knows how much.
But there was a transit project in Ottawa that had its contract broken, and there were fees charged associated with that, which could be a model. Have you made any accommodation for those costs at all?
We have no idea what the fees will be.
So you've made no accommodation for those costs?
There might not even be any fees at all.
So we've had the answers. The audience will decide. Mr. Rossi?